very well done. That is, there's less, see, how they deal with quality of manuscripts. You just cut it off? Okay. Oh, how, huh? Yeah, you can cut it off for a second here. As well, that verses 10 and 11, verse 10, when it starts with pon, which is every knee should bow, all the way down through halomagasetai, is kind of growing out of out of Isaiah. Okay, quoted in Isaiah there in the Septuagint, and then Romans 14:11 as well. Whereas Paul had quoted this before, and it's here in 14:11. It says, "For it is written," coming from the Septuagint, I live, says the Lord, that as far as I live, that every knee shall bow to me," and there's the future, "and every tongue shall confess to God." There's the future. Those are both future. Right? And so we've got the concept of the future there going out of the Septuagint. So now I've got another issue to deal with here. Are we following through with Septuagint reading, or are we following through with a non-Septuagintal type reading? You see what I'm saying? So there's a number of issues that go into play in this particular problem. So let's look at the various rules. Catalyst. If this was original, would anybody have determined to change it to a future?
No.
All right.
No, even though
Well,
mention it carries the future.
in this sense, go ahead.
It carries the future meaning, even though it's in the narrative.
It does. It does. If it falls under the governance of the hina clause, preceding hina clause, okay, would anybody decide to take it out of under the governance of the hina clause? That's the question. You know, like putting it in the future, in other words. If this was original, would anybody decided to put it into the governance of the hina clause? Okay. That, you know, you could go either way on this one, right? How about the concept of harmonization? Paul, you quoted this before. He quoted this passage before, right? And in quoting the passage before, he quoted this, which is the way in which the Septuagint is listed, right? So now the question is, would he be inclined in any way to adjust away from the Septuagintal reading in a passage that certainly alludes to that Septuagintal reading that he had used before? However, when he used it before, it wasn't under the governance of a hina clause, it was the governance of a hadi clause. Right? Now, he has introduced a hina clause, right? So now, did he then vary the Septuagintal reading into a subjunctive to go along grammatically with how he has introduced this whole segment? You see what I'm saying? And in light of that fact, potentially not even make a semantic difference much, because future or subjunctive and future indicative are so similar in their semantic and grammatical force, right? And there are places where, in fact, there is a what should we say, where you expect the subjunctive, even in Paul, I forget the exact places right now, you expect the subjunctive to occur and the future occurs, and where you expect, you know, in other words, that interplay takes place in other places. So it's not all that wild at that stage. So at any rate, there's various ways you could go when you look at that kind of data. Let's look at so maybe the external data is going to play a good portion or a good role in this. Maybe. Let's see what it says. P46, B, those are wonderful. You just kind of thank God that they're there. But then the other side of the coin, you got A and C and D, and you thank God for those manuscripts. They're just in the wrong place. In other words, your primary manuscripts to which you dial down in this theory, you know, are split. You see what I'm saying? So there's a little problem there. Now, and notice also you've got here the partially part of the Byzantine manuscripts, and there's certainly Western manuscripts and writers involved in this one as well. So you've got Alexandrian, Western, and Byzantine. On the other side, you've got Alexandrian, and you've got Western, and you've got the other part of the Byzantine. Okay, right? So externally, you're split here. Yes, go ahead.
I was looking at some of the names,
Yeah,
and some of them appear in both.
yeah. Well,
But
where are we at?
Are they different?
Which one are we talking about particularly?
Like Cyril and Gregory Nyssa. Am I just...
Sometimes what happens, if I'm looking, if I can see what you're talking about. Oh, Gregory Nyssa. Oh, 1 out of 2. What that means is he quoted this twice. And one time he did it this way, and then the other time he did it the other way. So even him, he is schizophrenic. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. Okay. So what do we end up with here?
So is that like Cyril here? Out of the 10 times he quoted it, or Cyril, 8 times was...
8 times he had it with the subjunctive, and then 2 times he had it with a future.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So what we've got here is the primary golden rule things. I'm not so sure that's going to solve the problem, although it's easier to see this under the governance of the Hina than it is breaking away from it and becoming independent, if you will, right? Even though if it was this, it could still be semantically under the governance, right? So, and from the standpoint of the external data, it's split, right? So what are you going to do at this point? What are we going to decide at this point? Well, let's see what Metzger decides here. Okay. Although the subjunctive may be a scribal assimilation to compse, which is the other word in parallel in governance of the Hina clause, the indicative may be an assimilation to the indicative hametai, or shall swear, in Isaiah 45:23, which in Isaiah 45:23 is where this quotation grows out of, and there's that other word in there, okay, which is the future, okay. Faced with such a balance of possibilities, and that's what we're looking at here, right? The committee preferred to adopt the reading supported by P46, Aleph, B, and some of those others. So they were persuaded mostly by the external at this stage, Aleph and B particularly. Okay. All right. So that's that particular problem, which is always a fun one to have when they seem to be so many things that are in conflict with one another here. Okay. I think the more dangerous thing on this one would be to, in my view, since there's so many different possibilities, would be to pull the last word out, that is verse 11, out and disassociate it from the Hina and make a major theological declaration at that point. I think that would be the more dangerous. I would be a little more skeptical at that point than keep it under the governance of the Hina clause and see 2 ideas there. Every knee shall bow and every tongue is going to confess. Right? Right. So,
Would there be any problem in the translation from the Hebrew to the Septuagint?
oh well, see the problem there is that Hebrew is not tense, or if you want to call it tense, is not, time is not defined in it, is it? And so the Septuagint, the translators into the Septuagint have to determine the time frame, right? And sometimes the Septuagint determines a time frame that is different than a Hebrew scholar would concur with, you know, in the context of Isaiah in this case. Okay. I don't think this is a major issue. Isaiah 45:23. Open the real Bible here. 45:23. 45, 23. Okay, and I'm on Septuagint. Okay. On myself I swear, righteous look out from me, the word did not return, because to me, about every, okay, to me, because for me or to me, every knee will bow. It's a futuristic idea, okay, and it's under a kind of an indicative kind of a statement there, right? Every tongue shall make an oath or confess at that point, right? So, and the Septuagint has taken the future at that point because it's under the governance of a haughty clause, indicative clause, right? Not a subjunctive clause in Hebrew. Okay, so let's look at the last one in this section that I've got laid out for us here. What is it? 2:11. Oh, another problem with 2:11. And that is the word Christ here. So I've got three options. Verse 2:11. Every tongue shall confess that under the high God. Jesus is Lord. Jesus Christ is Lord and the glory of God the Father. Lord Jesus Christ is in the text. Okay. Then another option would be Lord Jesus. And then the third option is given is Christ the Lord. Okay. Now, looking at our list, could there be any unintentional error that creeps up here? Unintentional. We could potentially maybe see some unintentional stuff going on here, since we've got all these three words are represented throughout the whole thing, right? I don't think he would have, I think it would be difficult to leave off, if he was reading and memorizing for purposes of transcribing this, it'd be difficult to leave that off. Okay. To drop it off, that's what that would happen there. I'm not so sure. To replace it over here out of curiosity would be pretty difficult. See, that's probably more intentional than unintentional if that's the case. Maybe something unintentional there could happen between the two, although that's a little fuzzy at that stage. Okay. So I'm not so sure about that. Now maybe, notice verse 10, that at the name of Jesus. Okay. Well, the word Christ isn't there, right? So somebody might intentionally say, well, let's just make sure we got the right, since Jesus is a relatively common name, Hebrew name, Joshua, okay, let's define it a little more clearly, know which Jesus we're talking about, right? So we could say, well, maybe intentionally they put either the word Lord or Christ, right? Possibly, right? So that's potentially be some theological thing going on there. Could there be any conflation going on there? Well, if these two were in different manuscripts, somebody could say, well, gee, let's put them all in just so we don't make a mistake here. Right? Could potentially see that possibility. Harmonization, well, that could occur because we find Paul using an awful lot the Lord Jesus Christ, even in this book, right? He uses that more than he just uses the Lord Jesus, even though he does use that. And he uses that more than he does Christ the Lord, clearly. Okay? Right? So, but that could be, that could be a theologically oriented there. Focus on the word Christ, Messiah. Okay? So there's some possibilities there. Let's look at the golden rules. If this was original, could anybody decide, oh, gee, let's take the word Christ out? That's kind of hard to say. If this was original, somebody said, let's take Jesus' name out of it. It's kind of hard to say, right? Okay. If this was original, would anybody say, well, let's put the word Jesus in it? Yeah, that could be, because, Christ is undefined in and of itself as a term that means anointed one. Or this one, this was an original, let's say, well, let's put the word Christ into it. Define who Jesus is, that is the Messiah. So we're at a point where, frankly, any one of those could work, right? Right? I mean, if this was original, you can see how maybe this could arose. This was original, you could see how these other two could potentially, well, certainly this one, I'm not so sure about that one, but maybe so. Because if this was original, I can't imagine them taking Jesus out and placing Christ in. Can't imagine that, right? But we can imagine this. Okay.
So what it would appear is that the scribes at times, maybe for clarification's sake, in their own well-intentioned minds, could be adding things.
Could.
I mean, do you find that quite a bit in these textual problems? That seems to be, or
When it comes to harmonization issues, definitely. Okay. And theological issues, definitely, but those need to be fairly clear in the text that you see. And most times they're usually fairly clear. So, from the standpoint of that golden rule, and the hardest, the most likely catalyst giving rise to the other, if this was original, I can't conceive of how in the world these arose, right? If any one of these was original, I could potentially see how this arose. If this was original, I can't quite see how this arose. Or this one is original, I can't quite see how this arose. I make much more see how this arose, right? From the standpoint of Pauline's style, for instance, I can see much more here than the other two, right? I can see that. I can't quite see as
Speaking
much
about
strong the other way.
the tendency to write to be heard, Christos Kurios, the K sound has a ring to it to me, like a slogan, like, would Paul necessarily do that? I don't know. He uses the same sound in chapter 3 with the dogs and the...
Yeah, he does use sound there.
It's just an observation. Whether or not it's valid, I don't know. It's just...
Well, in some places it will be. You'd have to track that down. That would be kind of a word study thing. You would track that down to see if in Paul, in fact, does this combination anywhere else, and to see if there's what the reason for that would be, if there is there. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not, in fact, the way in which it's laid out, it puts the emphasis upon Christos, and the question in our text would be, I think, well, is there any question about Christ being Messiah or anything? You see what I'm saying? To put this word here. Okay?
During that time, just historically, people were kind of forced to claim Caesar as Lord.
Yeah.
Could this be kind of a rallying?
political, I think.
Yeah, Christ is
Because
Lord. I'm just
I don't know.
straining at things maybe, but
that's right. In the knees and bowing and tongues confess
Mm-hmm.
too.
Good question. I've not investigated that at all. Well, let's look at the external and see what we find out here. Now, this particular opinion statement, A, B, C, D here, on this particular one, they opinionize that this is an A category, which to them means there ain't no question. We got it right. That's it. Okay. And here's the external evidence. You got all A, B, C, D, E, F, G, Z's, all of the wonderful manuscripts that they love and adore, of course, is here. You got the Byzantine family is here, you got Western family is here in large numbers, not always, okay? What do we have for the Lord Jesus? We've got corrector of A, which is Alexandrian, but they've got another, in that there's a difference in the sense that it doesn't read the Lord Jesus. It reads the Lord Jesus, the Lord, without two words, two Lords there. Okay? Which in itself looks a little suspicious. And a few Western manuscripts, F and G, Gregory of Nyssa puts twice out of 10, he puts that there. And most of, let's see, where is he at? Gregory Nyssa, 8 out of 10 times he puts the first one. So they little divided there. The last one, Christ the Lord, has one manuscript, a Byzantine manuscript. That's it. That's listed here at least, one manuscript. So from the external evidence, you would say, we're going here, external, right? Okay. From the standpoint of Pauline style, I think you would say we're going here. Okay. I'm not so sure that those other rules can eliminate the other two in and of themselves. Well, let's see what these people who say we got it right, let's see what they opinionize on this here. Where is it? Here's the expansive discussion here. One sentence. Several witnesses, chiefly Western, omit Christos. Okay, that one there. Perhaps in order to conform to the expression that to that in verse 10, which was that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow and every tongue shall confess. In other words, to conform to the elimination of that. Okay? But their conclusion completely is that the external evidence, I'm sure they would also say, if they expanded their note, not only the external evidence, but probably the Pauline style issue would force them to say, no, that's got to be the original. Okay.
So Metzger book is in companion with the UBS text?
Yeah, it's UBS, right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So usually whatever inside is already in.
Dr. Wretlind?
Yeah.
It seems to me that these variations, in one sense, don't seem to make radical difference theologically. Have you come across instances where you would go, whoa, where did this come from? That just seems so out of character for the scripture that it's just like, you know what I'm saying?
In the sense of what?
Well,
theological aberration of some
yeah,
sort?
if it said, you know,
We got that.
the devil was the Lord in some, for example, in some manuscript somewhere. Have you come across any kind of variation?
Well, yeah,
It
there are
just
some
seems to be
places
so
where
outlandish.
there are some places, for instance, in 1 Corinthians 15, there's a major, where am I at now? There's a major problem which says, behold, I tell you a mystery. We shall not all fall asleep, but we shall all be changed. Right? Well, there's a variation that says, for instance, we shall not all fall asleep, and we shall not all be changed. Another variation that says, we shall all fall asleep, but not all of us will be changed. And therefore there's another variation, we will rise, but not all of us will be changed. Another variation that says, we will be changed, and all of us will be, or we will be, fall asleep, and all of us will change.
That's the nursery verse, right?
Right? So in other words, that has significant theological ramifications.
That's
down
15,
15, what is it, 1551, yeah. So, you know, so sometimes you have some pretty significant changes that you have to deal with that are significant. And other times they're not quite as dramatic. I'm going to put it that way. I don't want to say they're not significant. I would say from the exegete point of view, every one is significant. Even a word order change is significant. Okay, which this would typically include anything with a word order change. Now, Let me go to page 55 in the notes. Here is a seemingly insignificant change here. It is well known that Jesus had male siblings or half-brothers. We get the scriptures involved with that. Okay. 1 Corinthians 9. John 1:45 gives testimony to this fact, even though most translations ignore the data. 3 lines of evidence point to the conclusion. Textual criticism, grammar, and parallel passages. Okay, we're focusing on textual criticism. NA 27, that's all on, notes a textual variation at 145. Significant number of major manuscripts insert the article before huion. Okay. Other major manuscripts do not include the article. The textual critics involved in both the 4th edition here, this text here, and the NA 27 have adopted the non-article reading without the article. No doubt based upon the textual critic actions, the hardest reading is preferred. Reading accounts for the alternatives to be accepted as original. You know. Okay. The expected grammatical construction for the defining phrase, Jesus, Son of God, one from that, is articular as seen in John 1:42, 6:42, etc. That article does not appear before huion in this instance is rather striking and may emphasize either characteristics of a huion or indefiniteness, where the English would insert a. Okay? The obvious focus of the entire phrase is to define which Jesus is meant. The first characteristics option seems to be unacceptable in that regard. The second option, on logical grounds, accounts for the anarthrous or non-article construction. In a defining phrase such as this, the exegete can account for the anarthrous construction on the basis of indefiniteness. And then it can support a historical fact, subtly supporting the fact, that Jesus was only one of the sons of Joseph. Revised editions of the New Testament translation should, in fact, reflect that indefinite reading. Okay? But they don't. Okay? That's what I think. For the exegete, that's significant, maybe even for a theologian, right? For a general translator, maybe they're not quite as in tune to nuanced stuff, maybe not. There's another problem on page 56 that only has to do with word order. And I say, okay, well, is that very significant? Most of the people would say, no, it's wasting our time with the word order issue. But now, is that really true? I mean, for those of us who know and understand Greek, we know word order has emphasis, right? But it does more than have simple emphasis. Here we got an example. Here, notice the 2 words. The first reading is the household servants being in subjection or to be in subjection, with all fear. And the next reading reads, the household servants in all fear are to be in subjection. That's just a word order. Where do you put the prepositional phrase? That's all that issue is, right? First reading puts a primary emphasis, and this is what word order does, puts primary emphasis on the forward positioning participle, in subjection. Submission. Points the reader backward to 2:13, which is the command to be in submission, be in subjection. A strong suggestion imperatival function for the participle. The following phrase focuses secondarily on the manner of submission. The primary thing would be submit. How to do it is a secondary issue there. Thus, the paragraph beginning at 2:18 emphasizes primarily what to do. Submit, right, as a primary thing. The second reading, by contrast, focuses attention on how to submit by locating the prepositional phrase forward. See, there's a difference in emphasis there. Fortunately, I would say, the major translations read the first option by agreeing with the best solution to the textual problem as we would have worked it out. Working through this so-called minor problem, but also helps to see a style of Peter in this instance. The participles in 2:18, 3:1, 3:7 represent the author's literary outline. Remember, this is oral stuff, right? Literary outline. Each element dependent upon the command to submit in 2:13. So there's a sense in which the order is part of the verbal outlining, if you will, here. Now, it's possible to discover this outline, if you will, without working through the textual problem, and since the translations have adopted the right one anyway. The point, though, I think is the fact for the exegete, you see, he is very interested in word order things, right? He's very interested in what the focus is, because that's what word order does. It focuses things, you see. And therefore, it becomes a confirmatory factor on the overall interpretation, right? The big emphasis in this case being submission. There's a proper way to do it, but submit is, yes, the imperatival idea that's involved here, okay? Okay, so I think that's important as well. So that's a minor problem that most people would say, well, it's irrelevant, but no, it's not. For an exegete, it's not irrelevant. At least in my study opinion on that. Okay, there are different viewpoints on this kind of stuff, and that's why I'm having you read another book. Okay, let's see, where's he's got, where is he at here? Charismatic. He's got it here somewhere. He's got some issue on textual criticism here somewhere. He doesn't do much with it, but where did he put that? Let's see. It must be under maybe the literary context, 111. Okay, let's see. Studies, learn. Okay, that's not it. Oh, establish the text of the passage under the provisional translation. Text of producing a provisional translation begins with textual criticism. In other words, you're not translating, you gotta know what words to translate. I mean, that's pretty obvious.
What page you on there, sir?
117. Yeah. Defined as the art and science of recovering the original text of a document. Textual criticism is necessary because no original text, autographs, of biblical documents have been discovered, and because the handwritten copies that we do possess differ among themselves, and so he's going into variance. Okay. Before we can translate, we've got to establish what Greek text needs to be translated, and so it's a pretty foundational issue there. Okay. Okay. Despite the specialized nature of the field of textual criticism, and it is rather specialized, you can now begin to take some sitting to have sort of understanding, making use of the listening. So here's his recommendations. It'd be worth your time to read a few articles to get the gist of the whole thing, and that's what you already are reading. Okay. We recommend the one by Fee and Holmes. I'm not all that familiar with Holmes here, but I am very familiar with Fee. And his method is the one we've been utilizing here for this. Okay. So you can see something about the history and all that stuff. Okay. Your teacher may want you to do additional reading. Yes, I want you to. Okay. And then he also indicates Greenlee here, who basically is pretty standard work. And then the other one, the text of the New Testament by Metzger. Okay. Secondly, become familiar with the apparatus, how to read the thing. That's what we've been talking about before, right? How to read the apparatus of these two Greek New Testaments. And he explains that a little differently, explains that a little more, as basically the same thing we have been saying. Okay. And then, after reading an introductory article, learning how to make sense of the apparatus, note how the experts wrestle with the problems in your passage. So he is now saying, read the commentary and see what they do with the passage, right? I wouldn't take that particular approach initially. I mean, that would not be my initial approach to it. My initial approach is try to work it out for yourself, right? And then see what his opinion. Now, you may not agree with this philosophy, right? When you say read what they've done with it, how these noted experts, all of a sudden that confines you to, well, gee, how could I differ from that? You know, well, you may not agree with the philosophy. You may be a majority text person. And therefore, you're not going to agree with this philosophy. Okay. Okay. So anyway, Sunit 2 tells you why the committee decided why the committee. So now he says, after you look at this, you'll be in a position to compare the rationale with arguments presented by other exegetes. Right? I would like to say, well, let's do your own work first, then find out what other people have done, and then find out what the commentary works. Okay. That's would be my approach to it at any rate. while the UBS editorial committee certainly does not have the definitive word on text critical matters, and while commentators do not always treat problems with reliable precision or use the same methodology, these secondary sources remain a realistic starting point for a beginner when it comes to this discipline. As a final step, know how to evaluate textual variants on your own. I would put that ahead. Okay? That's what I would do. Even if your work only confirms the conclusion of experts, actually, I get much more thrill out of the other way around. They agreed with me, they got to be good. You know, they agreed with me, as opposed to, you know, oh, gee whiz, I guess I'll just kind of bow to their greater knowledge, whatever. See? Okay. Anyway, so that's how he approaches that. So he's dealing with the same issues and some of the same books and stuff, but I would just take a little philosophical different approach to it, not major, but a different approach. I would like you to become textual critics of them in your own right, and also then understand that you don't have all the knowledge of it, and therefore other people's opinions may add something you didn't consider as a possibility, right? I would also say, he didn't say it, but some other books do, and that is they say, well, you know, only deal with those critical problems that are significant. Well, now, from the exegete, every single problem is significant. Every one. Okay? Even the seemingly minor ones are significant for the exegete. Not necessarily for the translator, because when you translate, for instance, you're going to have to change word order anyway to get it across. I mean, you can't translate Greek sentence into English in many instances, if not most, without changing the word order. So you're going to ignore the word order, right? And yet, for the exegete, word order means focus, right? And so it's tracking the argument, if you will, on the basis of focus. Well, you destroy that in the translator, so they don't even bother with this translation, you see. If they're not concerned about that, it doesn't affect translation because they have to ignore it. Well, for exegete, it's a different story, you see. And so I would say they're all important. Thus endeth my diatribe on textual criticism. Questions, comments, complaints? No.
For the exercises we're going to be doing, we need to have access to the UBS text and Metzger's handbook there.
Actually, here's what I'm going to have you do. I'll share with you this one part of this upcoming assignment. There will be more. I want you're going to write a brief paper, that means no dissertations here, that summarizes and solves the textual problems noted in the Greek New Testament. I'm using this one for your sake. It's easier to use. What we're interested in is the processes more than fighting with, what does that symbol mean in the NASB 27? You know what I'm saying, Angie? What does this other symbol down in the apparatus mean? It's going to reflect a lot of manuscripts of which one. This one and that, for our purposes, is going to be easier to define some of those things. Okay, and again, our purpose is procedure, not, you know, the knowing how to deal perfectly with the NAS 27, NA 27 here. So you're going to solve the textual problems noted in this Greek New Testament for the required translation, which is 2:12 through the end of chapter 3. Okay, now this is not going to be a major dissertation. I don't want to, you know, I mean, I got a life too, and it doesn't always Okay, so well, basically what I want you to do is the kind of a thing we've done here. Look, you know, write down the options here, work through the list that I've given you, and say, well, I see or don't see any possibility of intentional or unintentional, or I do, and this possibility, and I've looked at the, you know, the critical questions, you know, which could have given rise to the other, and, you know, just kind of a little summary statement, and here's a general, don't deal with every single manuscript, don't deal with everyone. You're just looking for, for our purposes, you're looking for early manuscripts, when those will be pretty evident after a couple of sessions here. through this, and then looking at geographic locale and those kinds of issues, right? And you're just gonna summarize where it seems to be going and make a statement, and you can, of course, use this commentary to see if they've added anything to your understanding or not. And so on this, then we've got how many? Well, we've got, let's see, I'm counting out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8. Oh, no, 8. Is it 8? I think it's 8.
It's 8.
Yeah, 8. It's 8. But they're not going to be dissertations here. And you can keep in mind what the purpose of it is to get you through a process. Okay? And for this purpose, then, there's no right or wrong. It's to think through the process and try to come up with your own conclusions here.
Okay.
Right?
Looks like my other earlier concern was unfounded because there's 8 in this one too. So.
8, okay.
I was thinking there wasn't, that why I was doing that, I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
You want to
We can
find,
assure
let's see, let's go to USB 1 to see how few
yeah,
they got.
second edition only, actually.
Actually, there's a major difference between the second edition and the third edition.
Is that what the third says corrected?
Major difference.
So in order to find the ones that, the earliest manuscripts and the geographic.
Well, yeah, go ahead and.
What tools do we need
Yeah,
to
well,
have in
review-
order to do that?
Huh?
What tools do we need to have in order
Right.
to do it?
Well, review the model for the modified eclectic theory, okay? And that particular model then emphasizes what? That's the thing we want to focus on, see? So you're emphasizing the external evidence based on early date, so what you would need? Well, in here, you already have the manuscripts dated by century. They're there, okay, in the front of the book. Character of manuscripts, well, now that is not going to be in here because he doesn't tell you whether they're Alexandrian, Western, Byzantine, whatever. Okay, now you can use the Allende textual criticism book that I've got, or Greenlee, and Greenlee would probably be easier to do for you. That little chart thing, you know, easy chart, and he doesn't have a whole lot there, but enough for us to do what we're working at. Okay, yeah.
Is there a way we could maybe make a copy of that?
Well, you
chart?
could. I tried to copy it. I tried to copy it off of this from home, and it was so fuzzy you couldn't read the P21. I couldn't read. Now, if your copy's off, fine. Or you could use the book, and if there's a copier around, then you can copy it off of the book, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, and that would work. Okay. Okay, so that's what you're going to need for that. And that would take care of the geographical distribution and genealogical relationships are all connected there, okay? And the internal evidence involves, of course, these key questions that you asked, which could have given rise to the other, right? And you just follow through with that. And so you don't need anything there. I would say utilize the commentary to see what things they utilize to make a conclusion. You don't have to agree with them, don't get me wrong there, but at least they're saying these are the things that appear to be significant for their conclusion, which may or may not be the same that you would agree with. Okay? So those are basically the things that you would need. You follow me?
So you said this is only part of our assignment?
That's part of it.
Oh.
Yeah, that's only part of it.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I was wondering how to do this.
Yeah, you wonder, what am I going to do with the rest of the morning? I got something to do. I mean, the Super Bowl's only one day, what am I going to do with the rest of them?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm worried about.
Remember, there's Martin Luther King Day, okay, there's a Martin Luther King Day, and there's a President's Day.
The
that's
Pro
in
Bowl.
February.
After that national championship, who wants to watch another game? It's like just all of them.
Okay, that's it on textual criticism. Okay, it's a major topic because of both of its, what should we say, importance that people place upon it, which of course is very important, but also the mistakes that are made with respect to it, and also then the focus that we need to give to the concept of word studies that is different than how most people conceive of word studies. Okay? And therefore it's tools as well. Okay? So it's an important concept here. Now, I'm going to start at the notes in 57, but before that, I just got a couple of comments I want to make. In Carson, he has a long section on word study fallacies, which are one of the things you'll read this week, in the next few weeks. But he says at the very end, as important as word studies are, it is very doubtful if profound understanding of any text or of any theme is really possible by word studies alone. Now, you listen to some people talking about doing exegesis and stuff, and you get the feeling that the only name of the game is word studies. Okay? And here's another statement. Perhaps the principal reason why word studies constitute a particularly rich source for exegetical fallacies is that many preachers and Bible teachers know Greek only well enough to use concordances, or perhaps a little more. There is little feel for Greek as a language, and so there is the temptation to display what has been learned in the study, which as often as not is a great deal of lexical information without the restraining influence of context. The solution, of course, is to learn more Greek, not less, and to gain at least a rudimentary knowledge of linguistics. Interesting conclusions on that. As you read this, you'll see all kinds of mistakes that could be made, and that all of us at one time or another probably have. On word studies. It's the important section. Biblical Greek exegesis, another model for exegetical work. He says, if students were asked to vote on the most popular part of the exegetical process, we predict that word studies would finish at or near the top in the ballot. If done properly, that's a big if, I guess, the study of individual words can produce a bountiful exegetical harvest. But the qualifier, if done properly, stands as a much needed warning that the field of word studies possesses more than its share of landmines. Okay. And so he says, we suggest you do some other reading on this kind of thing. Okay. And then he's got what I call a basic, very basic philosophical and logical error, which you find not only in this book, at least that's my opinion, you may not agree with it, and you find in other works on exegesis. And that's this. Identify and study the words in your passage that need special attention, or as he starts, select the words that need further study. Okay, now my contention with these ideas, okay, is how can you determine the significance of a word for a context without giving some study to it, right? And put it in a more focused way. When would the word kai become a source of particular study in this model? Probabilities, never. And yet I can show you, and I will show you, in the book of Philippians, there's other places, but the book of Philippians, for instance, where the word kai is an exegetical turning point in numerous places. Okay? And without understanding that word, its location, why it's there, and what it does, you will not understand the text. You cannot understand the text. Now, he says he understands that there's a problem there. He says, how does a student choose words for further study? Well, one category are words that the student doesn't understand in English. That's always a good thing, okay? That's in other words, words that are crucial for a passage. When will kai ever show up? When would a non-translatable word ever show up? And there are those, okay, right? When would an article show up, and when would a non-article word with a not an article show up? Okay? You'd never do it. Or you choose words that are theologically significant. Well, that might be a little easier to nail down, I suppose, at that point. Okay. Or rare words. Words that occur only once. Well, okay, maybe. But there's a number of words that occur only once in the New Testament that are very clear as to their meaning, and there's no question about it. So that doesn't necessarily mean that, Or a word that a writer repeats in a passage. Well, okay. Figures of speech, terms that are figures of speech, or if English translations diverge on a meaning, which of course means just about every other verse you're going to find that possibility. So I'm not so sure. I know what he's doing, and I know what he's trying to say, in a sense. But I think it's an exegetical error to say that without some focus on every term, you cannot be sure which are the crucial ones and which are not. It's a guessing game. And I like to think that exegesis is not supposed to be a matter of making the right guess in a nice, lucky way, if you will. And that's why I say, when does it take place? That is, when does every word get looked at take place in my model? Under the frequent steps or under the foundational steps? That's it, under the foundational steps. Okay. When we look at a word or a term, and we have to make certain decisions about it, you have to parse it, you have to syntax analysis it, you have to translate it, you look at it in the light of where it is in the sentence. We'll go through all this later on in this course. Last session in particular, we can do all this kind of stuff. Look at everything together. You look at it from various aspects, and you either conclude at that stage, I know everything I need to know about it, and move on, or you say, there's something here I don't quite understand, and I need to look at that further. Right? We show you numerous places where that occurs. Okay? But then, that means then that we do not do a full-blown word study in every word. I mean, that would be crazy to begin with. Okay? So it is a frequent step, word studies. Now there are, when you say do a word study, what people mostly think of is what? What are they trying to discover?
Range of meaning.
Range of meaning. What else?
Maybe how a particular author uses the word.
Okay, how author uses a particular word. Many times in sermons, when a word study is brought forth in a sermon, what's the focus of it generally? Or very often at least.
What it means.
The background of it. Some background information related to it. This word was used by, Homer in this sense, and gee, isn't that a wonderful application for us today? In this text, which may have no relevancy at all. Okay. What most people think of as key issues of word studies is the one thing that needs to be done least of all in the New Testament, as far as word studies are concerned. Put it another way. Most words in the Greek New Testament are well defined in Greek. What they mean is pretty clear. Most of the words, right? And so you do not have to do a full-blown word study on every word that goes through the diachronic thing. That is, it's from its earliest usage and its etymology and all the way on to the first century and beyond to get that. Most of the range of meanings in most words is clear. Okay? That's not what, and yet that's the kind of study that most people do when they think of doing a word study. What is less clear, and most of the time what we need to do, is not to figure out the range of meaning, but to figure out which aspect of meaning is in my text.
Right.
That's what you do most of the time, need to do. And unfortunately, that's not what most of the people who think about word studies are trying to accomplish. Right? They're just taking a translation for granted. Or, as we shall see, they're taking a commentary statement for granted. And this lexicon is in part commentary. Okay? Then there's another issue that revolves around word studies. So we can do words, and I've got them listed for you. I'll just go mention them for you, and then we'll go back. But ambiguous word meanings. Okay, we don't sure what the word means. We need to really track that down, right? And related to that to some level is the Hapax legomena on page 60, which means they're only used one time. Sometimes they're ambiguous, sometimes they're not. They're not used much. Ambiguous term meanings is where you do most of it. That is, what does this thing mean? It's got 8 options here. Which one is my text? Okay. And then the final one is ambiguous syntax. We know what it means. We know what's usage, but its relationship to its context is unclear. And that's a word study issue. Okay. So there are at least 4 key models, if you will, or reasons or methods of word studies, because you're dealing with different aspects of the study. Okay. All right. Okay. What I want to do first off today, looking at the bibliography, point out a few key items in the bibliography. You need to do any kind of independent work on your own. You need your own major lexicon. Everybody have one? Art and Gingrich, whatever, right? You got one? Working on it? Christmas is over. When's your birthday? Come on, let's get on it. It's a expensive book. However, it's one that you will use constantly and for the rest of your life. It's not one of those books that you use, every now and then, and most of the time it's a doorstop. It's just
Was that the BDAG?
That's the BDAG, yeah. That's the latest one.
3rd edition.
Yeah. Okay. That's this is the 3rd edition that I had brought. It's a heavy little deal. Did you see how much it was? You got afraid to say.
It's about 127, I think.
Yeah, right. Cheap. For all the value and if you want to do your independent work, you can't do that. Okay. Okay.
Oh, cool.
So,
Oh, yeah, I don't know what I paid for it, but I was listed on 127.
yeah, right. Yeah. Well, save your money. Yeah, you need to have it. Okay. Bottom line, you need to have. Actually, you can find, and the preceding version, 1957, I think, the 2nd edition, you can still find in used bookstores, Christian bookstores and stuff, and they're not cheap. And they are very functional. What has changed here in this one, and I'll go through this in some detail in a few minutes here, but what has changed is the layout has changed, and also some additional reference issues have changed. But that does not render the 2nd edition no longer functional. It certainly is very functional. Okay? So just keep that in mind if you run across one and you can't yet afford this. Okay. Then I've got, of course, exegetical fallacies. We need to read that about every other year to keep them reminded. But for doing your independent work, you need a lexicon, you need a concordance, okay? You need to be able to figure out where these words are located, right? A concordance that either is a computer model, which of course a lot of you have, or a book, and I tend to like books more than computers for this kind of stuff personally. But you do need a concordance, and you need a concordance to do exegetical work. You need a concordance to be a Greek concordance, because you need to, oftentimes, if you're going to deal with syntactical issues, to track that down. Well, the Englishmen just don't do it for you. You see, you got to figure out. Well, now I'm looking at given number of word followed by a given number, a given case, well, you're not going to find it in English ones. You got to have a Greek to do that. You see what I'm saying? So that's the issue there. Or you're looking for, let's say, all the uses of the accusative case of something, right? Well, you're not necessarily going to find it. You have to look up every reference to see, what in the world we got here, you see. And the computer can generate that stuff, and of course, just looking it up in a book, and I've got a couple of them here. I've got, what have I got here? I've got, where am I at here? Oh, Kohlenberger, Exegesis Concordance to the Greek New Testament. That's the newer one. And then I've got, I don't have it here anymore, do I? No, I guess I took it off, but you could also, the one I've used over the years and still have is the, I forgot, 5th edition. The 5th edition, yeah. Oh, jeez. Whoop. And, senior moment, bear with me here. Senior moment. It'll come to me. Hang in there. Sooner or later, I'll burst it out in the middle of something. Okay.
So the Kohlenberger one, that has,
It's a Greek one.
you look up, say,
Logos.
Logos, and then it'll show you everywhere where Logos is used and all its different forms.
Everywhere where Logos is used in context, it'll give a little context thing there. And sometimes it'll break it out if it's a particular pattern. And say let's say Logos, okay, where it's the Word of God is there, it'll give you a number or something so you can associate that and find it quickly and that kind of a thing. So it's got various help models that are there for you. It'll come to me. Okay, so that's that. You got the theological, I've got here listed, it's actually 10 volumes now. The Theological Dictionary of the New Testament. You just got to be careful in some of these theological word books. Okay? The problem sometimes with some of these theological word books is is the root error kind of a thing that can take place. You know what I'm saying? Where the initial stages of the meaning of a word gets transferred throughout the New Testament, when in fact it's not legitimate to do that on occasion. In other words, these books are very valuable and very helpful, and I use them frequently. But you just gotta remember, number one, they're not written by evangelical conservatives. Okay, so their theology may not agree with yours on occasion, which is okay. Just as long as you recognize issues. And you just got to recognize when the lexicography has stopped and when commentary has begun. Okay, right? And when they start, and when they make jumps, as you can read through here and figure out some of those jumps, because he'll mention that work and some of the problems with it. But it is a very valuable work still. Okay? So I remember that. Liddell and Scott I have here, Greek English lexicon. Now that's basically your classical Greek lexicon. So if you're tracking ancient word usage from way back when, this isn't going to go all the way back into the classical usage. This is Koine Greek. So we're talking 300, and sometimes it goes a little before that, but 330 or so BC to 300 AD, that's kind of the range of the Koine period, you see. Even though, so that. And to do word study, some word studies, you also need a Septuagint. I've got listed Rolf's Septuagint, which is a good handbook about the size of this, a little smaller maybe. Okay, there's other ones, of course, that are massive tomes, but you also need a concordance to be able to figure that out, because keep in mind, as we shall see, that the Septuagint is a translation of Hebrew, and very often the Septuagint embodies meanings of words that are more tied theologically into the Hebrew sense, which is more so than the Greek on the street. You see what I'm saying? A theological dimension that you might not find on the street. And so there's accretions to words that are related to the theological, the Judaism, if you will, that get transferred then into the New Testament, because in fact the writers of the New Testament, almost all of them, were Jews, number one, very familiar with their Old Testament, but also their primary Bible was Greek. It was the Septuagint. That was the Old Testament, right? And the concept of the Old Testament term used in the New Testament is very often to be seen in opposition to the Greek concept of it. For instance, peace. You see, when Paul says, grace and peace to you, well, does peace, eirene, does that reflect shalom, or does it reflect the Greek concept underlying eirene? The Greek concept underlying eirene, meaning simply, just to be very simplistic, is the absence of some sort of external conflict. If I'm not at war, I'm at peace. But the Hebrew concept of shalom is much broader than that. Okay? It's not just the absence of conflict, it's the presence of all well-being in every aspect of life. Does Paul use shalom in the sense of shalom, or does he use it in the sense of Greek sense? In that phrase or in other places. So, in other words, there's a sense in which the guy on the street, when of the Greek speaker of Tarsus, you say shalom, you don't know what you're talking about, because you're not Hebrew, but you say eirene, and he's thinking Greek terms. He's not thinking Hebrew terms. So there's that transference that takes place, and Septuagint becomes exceedingly important for the meanings of New Testament terms and ideas. You see? So you need a Septuagint to do your own work and a concordance of the Septuagint to be able to find out where these words are. I got Hacks and Redpath listed. It's very helpful, and of course also what it does is tell you what Hebrew words underlie it, so you can go, after you've taken Hebrew, you see, then you can go and you can track down the meaning of the Hebrew term and see how it relates to the Greek terms used, etc., you see. Okay, so that's very helpful here. I got Luo and Nida down here, Greek English Lexicon of the New Testament based on semantic domains. And what that means is that words, how can we best put this, because I couldn't bring my 2 volume. I want the plane to go down because of weight, so I have to wait, leave my pants at home and bring my lexicon. Semantic domains. Let's take the concept of anger. Okay, it's a concept of anger. Now there's a domain in the usage of anger wherein maybe another term, and I don't have the exact illustration maybe best for us, but maybe anger could be toned down, could be used instead of, you might use irritation, you might use something less than beating up on somebody with your fist, And then there's another sense where anger would be used in a domain where you're really talking about your enemies, let's say, right? Okay. So there's different domains, and there are different words that would relate to these different domains, you see, right? And so this lexicon will break down the various domains. For instance, lordship, let's take one like that. Lord or lordship. What words of the New Testament have that domain in a sense? And does, for instance, does the term tyrant, does that fit that one domain, or is it in a different domain? You see what I'm saying? Okay. So that's a helpful work. If you have not, how many know about this one? Have you seen it? Okay, you probably got it on your thing there. Is that on there? Yeah, that's good.
It's a different one, but it's
what is it?
It's the Dictionary of Biblical Languages with Semantic Domains.
Oh, okay. Okay, so what's the year of that one? Did it have a date on that? This one was 88, it was done. And it was kind of a groundbreaking lexicon.
This is Swanson's.
Swanson? Oh,
Yeah.
Swanson. Okay, well, he would not be as detailed as Nida and Lowe and Nida, who are basically linguists. Okay. Yeah.
2001.
2001? Okay, yeah, but I still don't think you'd probably be as detailed as the one I am. And we've got Moulton and Milligan down here, the vocabulary of the Greek New Testament. What that does is look at the word from the standpoint of its non-biblical and street level usage. Okay, that we used to be out of print. You can get those now. There, you can see these now in CBD and other places. You can still get this work, and it is a valuable work. Okay. So you can see what the word meant on the street. Okay, and that becomes a valuable tool.
What about Weiss or Robertson?
Yeah, word study books. Taylor's another one. Vincent Taylor. Those books will basically they will do some word study stuff at the meaning level, and they will do stuff at the syntax level. Okay, follow me there. Usually they won't take you beyond what your syntax course took you to. In other words, the skills you achieve by being able to evaluate syntax things, they'll go to that level, and that's about as far sometimes that they'll go. Okay, it's every now and then they stretch a little farther, but they're really not complete, if you will, full-blown exegetical works. In that sense. They're valuable, don't get me wrong. I got some myself, and I look at every now and then. You know, but they don't take you as far as sometimes you need to go. Okay? And that's same is true with commentary. The frustration with commentaries is unbelievable. When you really need it, they don't talk about it. You know, when you really don't need it, they got all kinds of opinions out there. Maybe they're good stuff and good, you know, I'm not saying they're not valuable, but man, when you really come across a sticky wicket, a major problem, they have figured out a way to ignore it. You know, I mean, it's frustrating. Okay. Okay, that's all I want to say about that, except I want to walk through, I don't know, you didn't bring one of you, did you bring that lexicon, huh? You got it on the computer. Well, I want to walk through some things about it for you, and you'll have to use one of these someplace in your homework, by the way, because that's going to have a word study element to your homework. Okay.
Does this count?
And that won't quite cut it for exegetical work. That small deal.
This one's for sale.
Actually, it's very good for reading purposes.
Oh, no.
Okay.
I thought that was the message.
I want to mention, I want to just go through some things to show you all that's here and to show you some of the things to watch out for. Okay? Because sometimes we don't really know people don't know how to use this thing and how to read it and what kind of data is available. One of the processes that we, well, here's a word, I'll use this word, agnostos, which of course means agnostic, right? Maybe that's a good word to use by illustration. One of the processes will be, well, we need to find out the date of when these words were in use and what the meanings were at a certain date in time and how that changes over time, right? I mean, a word that might mean two things in Homer's day might mean three things in the Koine period, but one of them is not the one or the other one. I mean, some drop off and something else is used. We do the same thing in our language. You know, suffer the little children to come into me. What does that mean? Get a stick and beat them until they come. No, that doesn't what it means. You know, it's changed its meaning. Words are like that, our words, and so is the Greek words. So, I'm just looking at it. I wish we all had a copy, but let me just point something out here. What kind of information that exists here? We got a lot of abbreviations. Are you looking at that? Oh, okay. We got it from the verse that starts off on with agnostos, which is on page 14, and it starts with HOM period plus. That means Homer. I mean, the abbreviations for all of this is in front of the book, and the dates for Homer is in front of the book, for instance. Okay. So you can get dates of when that was writing. And then it says plus. So this work is used from the 8th century BC Homer on. So this is a rather work that has been there for a significant period of time, right? And it's still in use in the New Testament 20-year period. And then it says PHE, which means it's in the papyri as well. Okay, so that's helpful. And then it has a bracket, and then it has some strange letters and stuff. All this is found in the front of the book. All these abbreviation things which you need to manage. Okay.
And you're still looking at agnostos?
Yeah. Yeah. All these abbreviation things, and I've got an abbreviation that has PGISS, right? Well, actually, that happens to be a person. PGISS is found on page LXXII, if you can figure that one out. Okay. And it's a particular Greek papyri segment. If you needed to do like you were doing, let's say, research for dissertation and stuff, you would need to go to original sources. These are telling original sources here, okay? So that's in a papyri, where you can find the papyri, and it tells you where to find it, etc. And then it says that papyri there is listed 117 AD, so that goes beyond our time frame even, right? Okay, it gives you actually a Greek statement, sentence where it exists. Then it says LXX. What does that mean? That means it's found in the Septuagint, so I know that's in the Septuagint. I could look that up then if I needed to. And then it's got these other abbreviations, APC, SED, that's other works, that's abbreviated, I won't go to the abbreviation. And it tells you what book and what place. Irenaeus, that's IREN, means that. There's a Harvard work that in volume was probably, that probably stands for the journal. In volume 1, page 180 or something like that, is a discussion of that. I think that's probably what that is.
Harvey.
Huh?
W.
Or is that Harvey?
Harvey.
Okay, Harvey.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's an English physician and Thomas from
Anatomist.
that too.
Oh, okay. So this is jumping you to the front end. Okay, that's very good. Yeah, that's very good. Philo, we can get the dates for that, etc. Okay, now let me just point out some other things. And that gives you the meaning of it. Here's how it states the meaning. Oh, there's one. Good. Okay. Here's it states the meaning. Notice how it's listed in this particular book. Pertains to that which is unknown because of lack of information, and the meaning given is unknown. Right? Okay. So it's given you beyond just simply unknown. It's unknown for what reason. It's giving you some of that. Okay? And they're saying it's embedded in the concept of unknown. And then it's got, as illustration of Acts, in the inscription on the altar in Acts, to the unknown God. Right? Okay. This phrase is found neither in the Hebrew Bible nor in the Septuagint. That's, of course, a Greek phrase. And it gives you other places where it is found as well. Let's see. Let me move down to the bottom of this list down here. Then I have ZNW 141913. That's a journal. Okay. And that, of course, you gotta. Did you zip to it right away to tell me what it is? Look at it. ZNW is, where is this at here? Zeitschrift, or Journal for the Study of the New Testament, Wissenschaft. So that's in German. That's a German journal. But there's a German journal that is discussing this word. I lost my spot now. Volume 14 is of 1913, pages 309 and following. There's an author who, in the Journal of Theological Studies, volume 15 of 1914, F. Burkitt, pages 455 to 64, he discusses this word. And there's a number of people who then have discussed this word. And there's books, it lists books where studies are done. Chapter 2 in Studies in Acts, somebody wrote 1956, or the Areopagus Speech in Natural Revelation. That's found in the same thing, Studies in Acts 1955, 242 to 47. There's a lot of information like that. Okay. Let's go beyond there, down at the very bottom. It says MM. That means Moulton and Milligan. In other words, this word is listed in Moulton and Milligan, that lexicon that deals with the street meaning of words, so we know it's there. And it says TW, this is a theological word book, so we know that it's listed in the 10-volume theological word book of the New Testament. Okay, we know that. Okay, this word does not have an asterisk after it, and therefore we know that this is not a complete listing, of course, where it occurs in the New Testament. Okay. Where we have that, it used, or at least this, the old one did. Let's see if this one still uses the asterisk. I think it probably does.
This has an asterisk after MN.
Oh, that does it? Oh,
This edition.
that edition? Okay, yeah, right, okay. So that edition then said an asterisk. Does it have TW there too?
No.
Okay, so that one's not updated to the fact that it's probably got to do with the dating when it was put together. And then what that asterisk simply means, that's all the listings of the New Testament. Okay?
Reference something.
Now let me look at, let me show you the difference. What?
Nothing.
Let me look up a word as a common word. Let's take pistis. Okay? Faith or faithfulness, or how we want to deal with that. Pistis. I got it on page, what? Where is it at? Pistis. On page 818 is what I got. 818, 19, 20, and part of 21. So, okay. There's a lot to deal with here, okay? I want to point out how different this one lays it out than that older one. So it's easier to work. You can find pistis after pistulo. Pistis there. Notice how the layout, notice the difference, and I'll see if I can show you. I don't know how your layout is there, but where to start? I'm reading up, so I'll hear it. So yeah, you got one basic breakdown here, right?
Okay.
See what I'm saying? Then you got two. See how easy it is to find this? The easier it is to kind of zero in on things. They highlight things. B down here, C down here, 2 there, goes on, D over here, you know. See what I'm saying? So it's kind of laid out in a nice fashion, easier to find.
There's a lot of differences even in the wording here.
There is. There's been a little different, they've taken a little different approach to the
Yeah.
I don't know how that was going
That's
to
just like my favorite copy.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, it's easy to spot and find things out there. Good. Okay, now you'll notice that there are, the very beginning of this tells you how old this word is and where you could, how old it is, and it says all the way from Hesiod and Herodotus on, ranging in meaning from. Notice this little, so from subjective confidence to objective basis for confidence and everything in between. Okay, and so here's how you need to deal with these things. You come to a word pistis. The problem is, and this is most of the time that we do word studies, is this problem. Okay, I've got, how many major ideas do I have here? Number 1, number 2, number 3, at least 3 broad categories, according to this, right? Okay. That which evokes trust and faith. I ask myself the question, does the context seem to indicate that? Or 2, the state of believing on the basis of reliability of one's trusted, of the one trusted. Is that more the focus of my text, context, or not? Or 3, that which is believed, or body of faith, belief, teaching, that kind of thing, right? All right? That's where you start to try to zero down that point. Then within that, you'll notice how it moves on from there. For instance, that which evokes faith and trust and faith. Well, number 1, or A, a state of being someone in whom confidence can place, or the translation would be faithfulness, reliability, one of these words, fidelity, commitment, right? Number B down there, seeing a solemn promise of faithful or assurance, oath, troth, kind of an old English word in this new book, that's kind of strange to you. And even under that, you got various, then there's C. Where is C? Oh, there it is. A token offered as a guarantee of something or proof or pledge. So within that one, we've got three options. Broke down, right? So you've got to then go, if you're saying, well, it fits number one, generally, of the three different options that are in number one, where does it seem to fit? Right? Okay. Now you'll notice that under each one of those options there are Bible references. Right? That is commentary, folks. That does not mean you have to accept their opinion on that. Follow me? Okay. Now maybe you say, well, these guys are smarter than me and therefore I'm just going to go with it. Right? Well, that may be true, but they're primarily lexicographers, not exegetes. And the issue of exegesis is contextually being able to define and defend and prove, validate, whatever you want to use, that a particular function is evident be seen in my text. And you may not agree, in fact, with the lexicographer, who's not necessarily an exegete. Okay? Right? And not only that, he may not even be a Christian of your stripe, or a Christian at all. Right? And there are some places where you would not agree with their conclusions, even on their translations. Let's see how they've done it. I haven't looked up this word in this one for a while. Let's see if they've changed their theology at all.
Which one?
On apoleia, which is on page 127, which has number one, the destruction that one causes, destruction, waste, etc. And then number two, the destruction that one experiences. The first statement of meaning is annihilation, right? And complete in the process, and ruin. And then they give you some Bible verses. And then the concept of annihilation, which is a theological problem these days, some would pick up on that and say, well, you see, it means annihilation. Apoleia, right? Other people would say on this particular word, this is an example, is that it always has some eternal dimension and always means that, but it doesn't. There are contexts when it clearly does not have an eternal dimension. It has ruin, to be sure, destruction, but that context has to determine whether it's temporal or eternal. Right? And yet somebody would land upon this and read there and say, well, they put it here in this, my verse in this segment, and therefore it has to mean that. Well, it doesn't have to mean that. That's an interpretation. That's commentary. Whenever they put a passage, that's commentary. Lexicography has stopped. Now commentary is picking up. Okay, so you got to be watching out for that.
Would that be the case for all of their? I mean, not just the Bible, but even the other places where they've cited it, or is that
No, that's true there too. That's commentary. Okay. Now maybe there's got good reason for that, and we validate that. And, there are places where I would disagree with how they have made conclusions they have made. In other places where I've said, okay, it's an option. It's a Bible option. Other places, in many places, I say, well, okay, I think they probably got it right. Now there's other issues that are involved in here that you may not be aware of, and that is there's an awful lot of syntax notations that occur here. For instance, you get a word. Let's see, let's take a verb. That would be more easier to deal with here. Let's find a word, any word. Let's see. There's a common word here. That'd be a common word here somewhere. Okay. in, well, just Word, diamorizo, for instance, I just landed on one just for the sake of landing somewhere. And it gives me, of course, all my parsing stuff that I need, historical stuff that I need, etc. Then it says, in the middle, it means something in particular, right? That would be one focus that we need to do syntactically, is on the middle. And then it means, on the second thing, to distribute objects in a series, and it says it's used with ace tina, that's a syntactical formulation there. When this word is used with this ace tina, then it has a little particular focus, you see what I'm saying? And that particular one. Well, let's look at, well, here's one thing. Akul. You know akul has different uses. Akul.
You changed tables.
Sometimes it's, huh? Oh, okay, go ahead.